Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Conversation to Transform Birth. I'm really, really excited to share this beautiful woman with you. Sara, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Yay. So Sara is a sexual educator, a coach in sexuality, intimacy, relationships, and she's a birth doula. And she recently completed a year of training in the Ecstatic Birth practitioner training. And I've invited Sara here to share because of all the places she's actually sharing this work and supporting women in ecstatic birth and sexuality in the Middle East, in Egypt. And I'm fascinated by this because working in the birth world, we're all coming up against a tremendous amount of conditioning. We're bumping up against systems and structures that do not honor the female body and the design of the body. We're bumping up against layers of disconnect with our sexuality. And this is not only true like in Egypt, this is true here in the US, but it's definitely amplified in the Middle East. So I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, Sara. And I guess let's just start right in that spot is like, how do you navigate all of that? Like, I know there's tons and tons of layers to this, but just thinking about you as a birth doula going into the birthing space at a hospital in Egypt and talking about pleasure and childbirth, an idea that is really wild, even here in the US, right? How do you navigate that in the Middle East?
Yes, that's a wonderful question. And I think as you were speaking, what came up was that, yes, those challenges are everywhere in different ways, right? So I used to be in Hawaii and there were different challenges than there are in Egypt. But what came as you were speaking was that story about the starfish. I don't know, you know, the story where the boy is walking along the beach and he's picking up the starfish and someone comes along and kind of says, well, you know, you're not going to get all the starfish. What does it matter? And he puts one back in the water and says, well, it matters to this one. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like there's all of these huge structures all over the world that feel so constricting and really oppressive and overwhelming a lot of times. And I think what enables me to do this work is to really focus on the humans and the amazing women and families that are in front of me and creating connections with them and trying to understand them and trying to witness and see them and meet them where they're at and understand the system that we're working within, right? And that it may look slightly different than North America or the US, but there's a similar structure that we have to work within. So it's the human connection and the desire to really support the people that are in front of me and to love them as best that I can that enables me to do this work and gives me the inspiration and the confidence to move forward and to have, you know, often those really challenging experiences where things don't go as planned or there's a really difficult layer of challenge or person or institution in the way. But to me, it's the human and that connection that is just so inspiring and so hopeful also.
I love that so much. And what really came to me as you were speaking is this idea of like, what is guiding you, right? And we talk about this with our clients all the time. It's like, what's guiding your choices? What's guiding the decisions that you're making? And unfortunately, I think so often, especially for new moms, it's like fear of the unknown, fear of the pain, fear of what's going to happen to your body, fear of like, right? There's so much fear. And the invitation is always like, okay, fear is a very real and palpable part of the journey, especially when you're becoming a mother for the first time. But can you let your love guide you? Can you let that like centered, connected place, like see the fears, let the fears inform you, but actually the way you were speaking, it was like, okay, like I really let my love guide me. And that was beautiful, beautiful to hear and receive. And I was thinking about how you were telling me earlier that people were actually asking you for the support, right? It's not like you just decided, hey, I'm going to go to Egypt and like do this work. But no, like you were actually invited and asked and called like repeatedly to do this work. And so here you are, now you're in this country that, you know, I'm actually from the Middle East. I was born in Iran, of Iraqi background. So I get it. Like there's a lot that you're working against, and a woman comes forward and asks for your support. How do you meet her where she's at and start to open her to this possibility of birth as a sacred sexual act?
I think, first of all, it's that connection, right? And it's creating the safety and understanding, okay, what are, to the extent that they want to share the experiences that have brought them to where they're at, or that have made them into the woman that they are, right? And what is important to them, and what do they desire in their pregnancy and their birthing experience. And it's in creating that safety and that kind of blame-free, judgment-free, shame-free space, which actually is so rare. And I have so much hope for creating more of those spaces in this world, because in that space, anything becomes possible, right? And in the birthing world as well, I feel like there can also be a lot of shame and blame and judgment as to what is the right choice, but what are the right choices? What are the right parenting choices, you know? And there's so much pressure and so much expectation and so much idea of what is right and wrong. And when you're able to really just listen to what a woman desires and what she fears and what she's anxious about and all of these things, and create that space for, okay, that's all accepted, right? And it's all okay. And what is possible in that space? So from that space, often, you know, even for the first time, sometimes for a woman to have her story listened to, right? And sometimes that story is specifically related to her sexual experiences, or sometimes trauma, or even her birth experience, right? All of these things are imprints. From there, we're able to move forward with, okay, are there things that we need to heal or transform, or all of these pieces? And it's that openness that creates the possibility, right? And it's not that I'm going in trying to convince anyone. I'm going in trying to understand what their current understanding of pregnancy and birth is, what their desires are, and how I can support them in all of that, and then also offer possibilities. And it's interesting, because I know you mentioned before, a lot of women and families come into pregnancy and birth sometimes with fear and constriction.
Yeah.
And what I've really noticed here in Egypt is that there's such a beautiful awareness of that. There's a beautiful awareness of the fear, of anxiety, if that may be the case, of trauma even. But with that awareness, there's a desire to heal. And so these women are really showing up for themselves. And so when I introduce pleasure as a potential tool, right, and an option for how to move through some of these things, they're so open to receive that and to try it. And it's not like the constriction of like fear and there's nothing else. It's like, okay, I'm anxious, or I have these fears. So what can we do about that? And how can we move forward? And that's been such a beautiful thing to experience. And it's actually, I found it quite surprising in the beginning, actually, because I had a little bit of, ooh, how do I introduce this, you know? And it was so easy and smooth, and people were very receptive.
Yeah, I have a sense that it also has to do with like how you hold it, right? Because if you talked about creating that safety, creating like a no judgment zone so they could actually share their fears, their desires. But if you felt anxious in yourself around your sexuality or birth as a sexual act, or like even if you knew that it made sense, but had like an inner eek, that would undermine that safety, right? And so the fact that you can really hold that in your own body and the sacredness of it in connection with the safety probably also makes them more receptive to it. Do you think?
Yes, I would think so. The way that it's introduced, and also in that it's introduced so matter-of-factly, right? Because to me, it's a part of life, and it's a part of the birth preparation education, right? If I have a woman who's getting close to her due date, or you know, is past her due date, and maybe the doctor is thinking about inductions, it's like, okay, now is the time to make love. Like go and make as much love as you can, and some of these things. And it's when it's introduced without any judgment or opinion around it, they have the opportunity to take that suggestion, right, or that tool, and decide for themselves and feel what feels right and what feels good. And when you've been working with people and women, and they start to orient themselves to, okay, what is feeling good, right? And what is my intuition saying? That's so powerful in the whole process. And I also think it's a really crucial and integral part of stepping into becoming a mother. It's like they need to be able to feel into their bodies, to feel into their intuition, to feel into their pleasure, and operate from that space of knowing.
Yeah, that's everything. That's everything. And then also you had presenced earlier this idea that it's a healing journey. And I find that pregnancy and birth, they can be really like an accelerating pathway towards clearing things that no longer serve you, to healing rifts between you and your body, because you have that deadline, right? Like that deadline is unmovable. And so if you're coming into it with this full awareness that you really want to show up as much as you can and be the best mother you can be on the other side, and you're willing to do that inner work, that creates a place of receptivity to receive all of that.
Exactly. And opening the conversation, right? That, yeah, the pregnancy and the birth is this journey with so many opportunities. And then I like to say that for the woman, right, like it's an initiation that will give you everything that you need to become that mother. So even if there are challenges or bumps on the road, alongside with the fact that there is a soul coming in, right? And we don't know what soul journey that baby has chosen, so we can't be too attached to a specific experience, but we can keep orienting to presence and to what's going on in our bodies and to what might be possible in that next moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. So you create the safety, the woman comes in, she's able to meet, you're able to meet each other in this place of like healing, exploration, expansion. And then the birth happens and you have to maybe go into a hospital setting. How do you navigate that? Because I know that's a spot, especially when I work with practitioners, you know, not just in the US, but literally everywhere. Once you have to enter a system or a structure, then you know that your job has just become so much more challenging. And so how do you navigate that? I would imagine that the systems and structures in Egypt are pretty rigid.
Yeah. I think, I mean, there's similarities to North America as well. I think the biggest part of it, which we talked a lot about in our training, right, is my own embodiment. So that becomes most important, is how is my body nourished? Am I in my pleasure? Am I relaxed and open and receptive so that I can take in all the information and be a channel and a vessel for what wants to happen, and receive the information and receive the knowing and create that vibration that passes on, a healing vibration, and potentially one even of pleasure to my client, to the birthing mama, to the family, right? And there's so much work that we do outside of these birthing spaces in our own lives with our own practices and our own alignment and pleasure and all of these things that are absolutely required, so that when we go into these spaces that sometimes feel like, shh, you know, and it's like, we're the one thing that can be like open and receptive and breathing and shift these spaces and offer possibility. And because going in there with that aggressive, you know, force is not going to work. And it's the feminine receptivity that, you know, it's a sensation, right? And I know, you know, it felt sensation, but it's that vibration of healing and what is possible. And even in birth, where maybe it feels like everything is an emergency, and there are sometimes moments, you know, where quick decisions have to be made, there's always space for a breath, and there's always the opportunity for the practitioner to be the one who's holding that groundedness, that peace, that calm. And I found over the past year that it's absolutely essential that I nourish myself well enough so that I'm able to hold that space. Sometimes I'm literally, you know, the only place. And as I told you a couple weeks ago, I think, right, there was one vaginal birth in the entire hospital, one of the days that I was there. And so, you know, that was a very different experience of coming in and really holding that vision for my client and moving through everything that was happening in a way that kept that potential open. And ultimately, she was able to have a vaginal birth where everyone else who was in the hospital had cesareans. And so at the end of the day, that was really beautiful and really special. But it takes a lot of presence and embodiment within myself.
So well articulated. And it's so beautiful to hear how you're describing this. And I want everyone to just notice that Sara did not ever say like, I told them or they or this. There was no outside of herself, right? And that's the beautiful thing. Like sometimes we think we have to go into these spaces and like guard and hold and argue and this and that, but actually your presence, your body, what you're holding is even more powerful than all of that, as Sara just so beautifully articulated. And it's really, I see so many practitioners that work in the birthing space, they are holding that vision mentally, but then if your body is feeling contracted, walking into a space where maybe most of the women are having C-sections or some kind of intervention, your body is not holding the tone for that oxytocin flow, for that pleasurable birth, for that ecstatic birth, right? If you're contracted, that's a place where you need to do your own deep inner work to clear that so that you can hold it in your body, the way Sara just articulated so beautifully. And that's what we call in the ecstatic birth world, like holding the tone for pleasure. And actually, when you do that, you're not just doing it for your clients benefit 1,000%, but you're also doing it for you, like all those places where you notice that you get triggered, you get contracted, whether that's fear, anger, whatever those things are. I mean, it's all normal. You might be seeing things that that trigger you, don't resonate, that are not what you want to be seeing. But when your body contracts in that way, that's literally you're rebirthing there, right? Like that's your contraction that can possibly, if you approach it with consciousness, pave the way for your next expansion. So it's really beautiful, Sara, to hear you articulate that actually, going into a hospital, even in Egypt, it's not about, oh, they need to do things differently, or you need to prep ahead of time, or you need to lay groundwork with anybody else or present a birth plan. Like all of those things are well and good, but actually the most effective thing is how you're holding your tone in your body.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also opens up your perception so much as well, right? And I just remember at one particularly challenging birth, my mantra that came to me was like, okay, no judgments, drop the judgments, open heart, drop the judgments, open heart, right? Because I know, and this can be translated to other countries as well, but there are things in the culture and society and religion that I don't understand, right? And there are things that are so many things happen that we can't control.
Yeah.
And so if we can just be present with an open heart and try to not judge, we're able to take all of the information and move forward in the most loving, supportive way from there, rather than trying to explain why what's happening is wrong.
Yeah, no, that's really beautiful. And obviously you're in the most extreme version of that situation, working within a culture that is not your own background. But I'd imagine that that holds true no matter where you are and who you're with, right? Like you don't know what the full extent of what someone's carrying when they come into the birthing space, whether it's the mom, the dad, the OB or the nurse that walks in. You don't actually know all of that, right? All you know is like how you can hold yourself. And I love this vision of, just like really holding an open heart and no judgment. And within that, holding that tone for an ecstatic birth within your body. It's really beautiful. I'm curious if you've ever encountered an experience when you're supporting a mama and she's maybe using some of the tools or practices to really support her and her sexual energy. I'm curious whether that's overt or not. There's a wide spectrum of them that we offer, but I'm curious if you've ever hit like resistance from, let's say, a doctor or somebody in the space about like, what are you doing and why? And if so, how did you navigate that?
I don't think that I have, to be honest. And I think that it's probably because we have been doing things that are more not noticeable.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, my experience here in Egypt is that I've been working with some doctors who are very progressive and very open-minded and really care about the experience that the mothers desire. So they are as hands-on or as hands-off as they want to be. And in all of that, the environments have been quite supportive, and then the ones that have not they've been in other ways not related to kind of what we're working on separately, you know, with the mama and the family. It's more institutional policies and things like that that came on. So I would say that honestly, usually in that case, like the institutional case, like the doctors are just oblivious and they don't notice anyways, in my experience, and not in a bad way, just like we kind of get to do our own thing and create a bubble, right? And then in the experiences that I've had where the doctors, the mothers have desired really independent experiences and the doctors have honored that, we're given the time and space to do whatever we desire.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And really, really exciting to hear that even within, you know, really strong systems and a strong patriarchal background, that there are beautiful practitioners everywhere that we can align with to really hold that space for the highest good of mom and baby.
Yeah.
Sara, I'm wondering if you would be willing to share a little bit about your experience in the ecstatic birth practitioner training and how it has supported you in doing the work that you do.
Absolutely. So I would say that the biggest piece for me was probably the embodiment piece and learning to have consistent practices of what I talked about before in terms of being in my pleasure, tapping into my body, tapping into my intuition, tapping into my knowing, really prioritizing that and following my pleasure in every area of my life. And then combined with all of the incredible knowledge, right? There's so much information, and I love that there's the embodiment pieces and the scientific pieces, because I come from a corporate finance background, so I very much love having both. You know, for the people who need the science, it's like, okay, let's talk about the oxytocin receptors, you know, and the different brain waves and these things that are actually research proven. And then there's also the embodiment and the things that you can feel and know and move through the practices of. So I love that it's so holistic and has so many different components, and that through the program, you know, if you're engaging with the program, it's like you're training your body into pleasure and making it so much easier for you to just continually shift into these places. And it really is, it's become, it has been part of what I teach as well, but more and more, I feel like it's something that's essential for every woman, is to know how to tap into that place, right? Like in a moment of centeredness, groundedness, pleasure, openness, right? So there's been so many pieces and parts of the training that I love, but those were kind of, I think, the most impactful.
Yeah. And I love that you spoke to the embodiment piece. And yes, there is so much that I share, that we share in the training. But for me, it's like, okay, can I get you through all of the information in 12 weeks? Like, probably, like if you know, just keep throwing it at you and you keep like taking it in up here. But for me, that embodiment piece is really what's near and dear, because that's the most potent piece. Is like, yeah, you can understand up here, and that's important, and you have the science and you have the research and you have the strategies and you have the practices, but it's when you get it in your body that when you feel nourished as a practitioner, which we know that the birthing world, like there's so much depletion just because we care so much, we love so much, we want to give so much, that you can be nourished and centered is so important. And then also that holding the tone is everything. We know the birthing field is really porous. We know that if someone with fear steps into the room, that the birthing mama is going to contract in response. Even if it's not her fear, energetically, she'll receive that. And so energetically, your presence as a practitioner in the space, being able to bring that pleasure, that oxytocin flow, that deep body connection is everything. So really, really fun to hear you say that. And I'm curious in general for practitioners, whether they decide to take the training, not take the training, for practitioners in general, supporting moms and wanting to elevate birth experiences, what advice you might have for them?
So not related to the training, or?
Yeah, no, just in general, like if somebody's listening and, you know, they're not in a place where they're ready to, you know, commit to a year-long certification program, but they are very intrigued about ecstatic birth or elevating their clients' experiences, what advice would you have for them?
I would say to definitely pursue some of the embodiment on their own if they can, right? So to explore what excites them, if that's dance, if that's movement, whatever it may be, to start getting them into their bodies and start playing with pleasure and seeing how they can bring more pleasure into their lives. And just as you were speaking, what came is that in so many areas of life and so many practitioner trainings, like there's so much knowledge and information, right? In the mental gates, in theory, in our heads. And birth is something that can't be faked, right? So it's like the body doesn't lie. It's very truthful. And so this training and starting to work with the body and the embodiment and somatic pieces is absolutely essential, because even in my past, I know lots of practitioners trainings, it's like we can do all the reading, our clients can prepare all the way mentally and know all the things, and then the birth can happen and it's a very different experience in the body. So just start placing more importance on the body and on our own bodily experience and start understanding that a bit better and playing in that space. I think we're then able to share that with our clients as well.
Beautiful. And I'm curious if your advice for expectant moms would be the same or different for someone who wants to experience an ecstatic birth.
I would say similar, and to just even amp up the focus on pleasure even more so and more so, because I think there's a lot of pressure that new moms or expectant moms put on themselves, even, right, to know all the things or to get it right, and to just reorient to tapping into their bodies and their knowing and their intuition and the connection with their baby, and start to source their choices and their movements from those places.
Yeah, really, really beautiful. Thank you so much. Sara, is there anything that you really feel called to share that you haven't already?
Just that there are possibilities, you know, the possibility of pleasure, the possibility of creating an experience that is right for you, right? And having a desire and figuring out a way to get support in that desire. So whether it's pregnancy and birth or in creating the life of your dreams, it's like, I just want everyone to feel inspired and motivated to really follow their hearts and follow their intuitions and their bodies and their knowing. And if this conversation or this idea sparks something in you, to listen to that and pursue it, because there's a whole world of possibility and so many magical experiences that we don't know about, right? And I think this is a whole new world that would really, I mean, is going to change our world and the earth. But the more quickly people find out about it, it will create change more quickly, right? So I don't have as much patience. I want to just like,
yes, let's all be in pleasure.
Yes, exactly. More pleasure for everyone, whether you're pregnant and birthing or not. I think, yeah, pleasure is a tool that brings so much healing to our world.
So beautiful. Sara, how can people find you? I know that you're working in person in Egypt, but you also support clients virtually, right? So if somebody wants to reach out and connect with you, how can they do that?
Yes, they can go to my website, which is www.saracousineau.com, or I'm also on Instagram, and my handle is Witness of Miracles, because birth is a miracle.
Love that. I'll put those links in the notes as well, so everybody can access that. And if you're listening and you're curious and you'd like to learn more about ecstatic birth as a practitioner, you can visit ecstaticbirth.pro to learn more about the ecstatic birth practitioner training. And as an expectant mom, I have tons and tons and tons of complimentary resources on my main website, which is ecstatic-birth.com. So we're here. We'd love to support you. You know, Sara and I and everyone in this field, we're just really, really passionate about, you know, getting you connected to your body, connected to your pleasure, and just bringing that forward. Yes, in birth, but also into your motherhood, into how you're raising your kids, into, you know, your day-to-day life, because it's elevating. It feels so good to be in deep alignment with your body in whatever it is that you're doing. So thanks again, Sara. It's been so beautiful to have this conversation with you.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
Lots of love, everyone. Until next time. Bye.